Atheist Nomads, episode 230. I will eventually have a clever title for this, but right now it's just an interview with Raquel.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin, and joining me is Lauren.
Hello!
Lauren and I are still on parental leave from the show, so this episode was recorded on October 28th. And yes, it is going up now on December 19. So by this point, we have definitely had the baby.
We had goddamn better have this freaking baby by December 19th.
If she doesn't come on her own, there would have been an induction. So yeah, definitely guaranteed. Look on the Facebook page or Twitter for pictures. There will be pictures.
Because it's not like I'm an oversharer or anything.
Oh, I will be posting pictures.
Yes.
I'm sure you will too, but yes, I will definitely be sharing well, by this time
it's
we'll have
podcast, baby.
An announcement. Yeah.
Pee in a pod.
So
cast.
Before we jump into the interview, let's go ahead and have a sponsor break. Yes, I know a break this early is crazy, but oh well. Atheist Nomads is proudly brought to you by Archway Hosting. Check out their low-price, full-featured hosting solutions at archwayhosting.com. That's ARCHWAY hosting.com. We're also brought to you by listeners just like you. You can find out how you can become a patron at patreon.com/atheistnomads. That's patreon.com/atheistnomads. And we are now joined by Raquel.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Pearson.
Yeah, Pearson.
Yes, I got it right. Raquel Pearson.
I'm still trying to get used to it. It's been a while, but...
It's been a few months, but she just gotten married this summer.
It's huge culture shock, too, for me. I went from Castillo to Pearson now, so I'm like, who is that person? Whenever I hear that name, I'm like, oh, that's me.
Oh, yeah.
And Raquel is somebody that we have talked about on the show before, because...
Usually with glowing admiration.
Yes, she is an amazing human being, and she is the one who saved Rocco.
Yay!
He's so cute. It was hard not to.
Yeah.
I usually stick to old Chihuahuas, but I saw him and I'm like, I'll take you.
Yeah.
I guess I can do that.
Because he was definitely, he was probably, 4?
Yeah, he was in
4 or 5.
He was in rough shape,
But
too.
he was throwing up trash and seizing and, had hit his noggin on a truck.
Yeah, so we think that he got hit by a car, and I was just working at the shelter one time, and I saw this dog everyone was kind of tending to, it was just really sad. And so I kind of went over there to see what was going on and found out this dog was dying. And so I decided to take him home after his stray hold was up to just kind of let him die in my house and have him have a little peaceful goodbye. And then he just didn't die. Like, he just did so well and started perking up and got super healthy, and that was just perfect for him.
Tears of gratitude and joy.
Yeah.
Because it is very possible that if he had stayed at the shelter that he would have passed. But there's something to be said for giving these dogs just a nice place to die. That is so sweet.
Yeah.
If only we gave our human beings the same consideration.
I know, yeah.
But can you imagine just taking a bunch of senior citizens, taking them out for their last hamburger?
Your turn. Come on, this is your last prune juice. Let's take you.
No, if it's your last, it's like go for the burger and milkshake.
Yeah.
And bourbon.
Yeah.
The bourbon and milkshake. But yeah, we ended up meeting Raquel because it wasn't all that long after we'd adopted Rocco that we were going to meet Lauren's then brand new newborn niece, and we're gonna be out of town for the weekend, and didn't think we'd be able to take Rocco along, and so we tracked down Raquel to see if she wanted to see him all healthy and alive, and she did.
Yeah, she took him for the weekend, and it was perfect. You've been our backup babysitter since then.
Yeah, I used to have a senior Chihuahua named Juliet, and they used to be best buds. So I still have a bunch of videos of them wrestling and just playing all day long. So that was fun for both of them. Yeah, he likes the cougars.
She was a pretty amazing dog too.
Yeah, she was really cool.
Quite a bit older.
All right, so Raquel, you seem to do whatever it is that you do, you seem to do it with the incredible gusto that few have. What is it you're doing now?
I was just going to say, what are you taking?
Yeah, so right now I'm working for a local nonprofit that basically reaches out to the Latino community here in Idaho, and they just try to help with different immigration cases, tax cases, healthcare stuff, and just kind of be there for them and advocate for them in any way that we can. We're not really specific to one capacity that we're, helping them. And so I've been doing a lot of work through them. We teach sexual education classes to Latino youth. We don't just keep it to Latino youth. Like if there's different demographic that want to join that, then we welcome them too. And we basically just teach them about sex ed. And it's not just abstinent based, because that's everything we have in schools already. And it's obviously not working because pregnancy rates are skyrocketing still.
Uh-huh.
And so we teach them about condom usage and how to properly use that and different birth control methods. And so we do that throughout the year in different districts here in Idaho. So I do a lot of that also.
I'm sure your husband was pretty amused when what'd you do for work today? And she comes home with a bag full of wooden dildos and condoms.
Yeah. So we have we have penis models that are made of wood, and we use those to show them how to use a condom and how to put it on and how to do all that stuff. So one of the first days I started that job, I came home with a briefcase full of just wooden dildos, and my husband was like, what is going on? He's like, is this for the shelter? Like, you do this I'm like, no, like the other job, like not the right one. But yeah.
Wow, you went home with a bag of dicks.
Yeah, and condoms and lube and dental dams, all the fun stuff.
Very admirable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that is really awesome that you're doing these programs for the Latino community, because birth rate in the Latino community, especially teen birth rate, is
the highest.
Is terrifying.
Yeah.
Latino girls need a chance to get an education.
Yeah, you need resources.
Yeah.
And also, I recently got certified to do HIV testing. So I will travel around and do HIV testing. And it was interesting to find out the Latino community is also highly impacted by this, and at increasingly higher rates, and disproportionately also. So I guess that can also be attributed to, low SCS status, maybe poverty rates, lack of education, stuff like that. And so I'm trying to do my part that way and educate them as much as I can to make sure that they know their status and then know how to protect themselves as well.
Very nice.
Yeah, you don't really hear about the Latino HIV epidemic.
Yeah.
It's not, that doesn't hit the news.
Yeah. And even like within our own community, you just don't really talk about sex to begin with, just because there's all this like religion and all this stuff that issues like this are pretty taboo. And I mean, I'm almost 30 years old and I still haven't gotten the sex talk from my parents. So
they're like, you're married. It is beyond us now.
It's like, you'll put two and two together. But yeah, so it's interesting to go in this work and try to talk to these students who have had no talk with their parents and are trying to figure out things on their own. And I think in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be going to Salt Lake City to do a training where instead of teaching students, I will also be teaching their parents about this stuff. So I'm going to be training their parents to talk to their kids about sexual health.
Wow.
So that's going to be interesting.
That is going to be interesting. That's a hard block to jump over.
Yeah.
But yeah, really cool stuff. So let's get a little bit into your background. What's you were telling us before the show that your mother's side of the family is fairly separated from the great land of Mexico by a couple generations. But your dad was from there. So like what area of Mexico do you predominantly identify with, and how did that affect you growing up?
So both of them are from the same area in Mexico, Guanajuato, which is kind of central. And so my dad was born there, grew up there, and met my mom when they would occasionally go visit their family there. And so I guess they met during one of those trips and they got married. And then my dad came over with my mom and kind of just settled here. Well, growing up, we used to always go see my dad's side of the family because he was still so close to them, and we still all are.
So you go back you went back every winter?
Yeah, so I went back to Mexico every winter, went to school there, and then came back in the spring, finished the school year off here. And so that was a big part of my just upbringing and kind of living in this dual system and trying to figure out my way in each part. Because here sometimes I didn't feel like I truly belonged here all the way, because I had the super Mexican name, and I went to ESL classes because I didn't know any English when I started school.
Oh.
And then when I went to school in Mexico, like I didn't fully belong there either, because I wasn't part of that community year round. So it was kind of hard to find my way, because I felt like I didn't really belong here or belong there. So it took a long time to really find my path in between.
Oh man, I can't even imagine having a split year schooling.
Yeah.
Like that. That would be so hard.
And not even just the fact that it's two different countries' systems. It'd be hard enough just between two different states in either country, but two different languages.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah, it was really tough, and it took a while to get used to, you know, and it caused a lot of like problems for me scholastically too, because I would leave in the middle of a school year here, go back there, and they're not on the same level at all, like, and so I'd have to come back here and try to catch up on the stuff that I didn't get to do for the past 4 months, and so that was really hard for me to try to catch up and then make everything on time to finish the year here with, whatever scores were needed to pass on to the next grade.
Your dedication and gusto for work is starting to make sense now. It's because you were literally just thrown in.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is how you learn how to swim. Boop. And you figured it out. You figured out what worked. And if you apply that to a career or school when you're as an adult, that is highly beneficial. You learned how to study. You learned how to, we're too lazy for doing any of that. We're just like, let's put in as little work as possible to pass high school. That's like the American average.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of work, but yeah, it's kind of getting to me this semester now. I'm at BSU. It's my senior year. I was working at the shelter. I recently stopped, so I'm doing volunteer work through there for some internship hours at Boise State, but I started working at the nonprofit during early this semester, and so I was averaging maybe 60 hours a week for work, and then I'm taking 22 credits at BSU, and they're all upper division credits, and
holy shit, it was just
killing me. So I stopped working at the shelter, and I just volunteer there when I have time, and so I just work like a normal job, at the nonprofit, and then just go to school and try to mitigate between those two. But yeah, it was rough. Yeah, I remember one time I was like eating a frozen burrito in the shower, crying. I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, this is too much. Like, I need to calm down, take it back a bit.
Oh,
wow. So doing all of that, and you also just recently survived cancer.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed. It's called MEN2, multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2. And so it's a genetic type of cancer that I inherited from my grandmother. She gave it to my mom, and then eventually my mom gave it to me. And I had no idea about this. I didn't even know you could genetically inherit cancer when, during the time when I found out. My grandma started showing some symptoms and had some tumors, got those removed and checked out. And then years later, my mom started having very similar symptoms. And so doctors started kind of making the connection, and they decided to have my sister and I checked to see if there was a link. And so we kind of knew, they had a pretty good idea before we got tested that this is kind of what they were leaning towards.
Probably genetic.
And that there is a probability that one of us would have it, and there's a risk of passing it on to your children. I think it's 50%. And so, yeah, I was really hoping it was my sister, but this is what I get for having those thoughts. So it ended up being me. I'm like, dang it. And so, yeah, it ended up being me. And I was in my early 20s when I found out, and I had to have surgery. I think that's when I had Rocco, and I had to find him a home right away because I was just so overwhelmed, and I was sick for so long.
You were very sick.
I spent in and out of the hospital for a while. So they removed my thyroid. So I'm on synthetic hormones now. And at the time, it was really hard for my body to adjust to those. And I kept having, for some reason, calcium issues and glucose issues. And so sometimes I would just pass out.
Yay.
And like just faint or get really queasy, and vomiting was like an everyday thing. Every morning I woke up with like terrible nausea. So I was in and out of the hospital a lot, and I somehow developed seizures through all of that. So I had to deal with some like several instances that were super scary because I'd never dealt with that. I don't even know if it's related to the hormones or anything, but I had to deal with that. And so, yeah. So now I think I'm in a better spot. I have everything fairly controlled. Every once in a while, my dosages get a little wonky, but I just go get blood work done and they readjust me, and it's all good now.
Yeah, wow. That's a lot to get through.
Yeah, especially when you're 20. It's like, I don't want to deal with this. Like,
no. No, so what you ended up doing was you passed Rocco on to Shannon, who was at the time Bucky's trainer, my corgi.
Well, had been
her trainer, and I was friends with her on Facebook, and she sent me a picture of Rocco, and I fell in love, and yeah, he got placed fairly quickly.
Wait, was that specifically shared with you?
No, I think that was just on Facebook. She posted a general picture of this cute puppy that she was fostering, and then I forwarded it to you and said, he wants us.
And I was so surprised how quickly he found a home. I think I was like...
Considering he was holed up in the shelter for so long?
I was right out of the hospital when Shannon messaged me, and she's like, I know these people, they're awesome. They take their dog everywhere. They're going to be perfect for Rocco. And so, yeah, I was like, wow, that was super quick. And yeah, you guys have been great for him.
Yeah, he's a daddy's little boy, that's for sure.
And it's times like this when people say, fostering is so hard. I can't imagine giving up my dog. You know, after you've had him for so long, you nurture them, get them back to health, and then you just kind of give them up. But when you find people like you guys who just give them unconditional love, like it just motivates you to keep going.
Because there's good places out there.
Yeah.
More good than bad.
Well, what was amazing with Rocco is as we found out more, the picture of what was going on started to shift, because like it was one of the things I quickly wanted to do was get the paperwork for his the treatment he went through at the Humane Society.
Yeah.
Get as many details as possible, and discovered that it all started only a month before we adopted him. And he was at Fuzzy Paws Rescue, which specializes in dogs that are likely to not get adopted at the shelter. And it was at Shannon's baby shower. Got to talk to the head of Fuzzy Paws, and she remembered Rocco, and I think we had Rocco with us.
Yeah.
And I asked her why did he go when obviously he would have been adopted quickly. She's like, he was there 6 days and nobody expressed any interest.
He did get one visitor.
And then it took 4 days and we got him.
Yeah, it was, luck had everything to do with it.
Oh man, we went down, later the day that we got him, we went to Petco, and the assistant manager there was already had just messaged Shannon about adopting Rocco.
We got him first.
Turned out there's like 4 people who wanted him right then.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works out. Like sometimes I guess people just don't go to the shelter or don't even consider looking there, but then they get adopted so quickly somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is he's camouflage.
Yeah, he's a cool color.
You put him in concrete, yeah, he's literally camouflaged.
Okay, enough about Rocco. Yes. Let's go back to Raquel.
He's a star of the show, Rocco. He needs his own podcast.
Yes.
Filled with barking.
Yeah. Just an hour of barking. The dogs can tune in.
Okay, so one of the questions that I have, and you alluded a little bit, I think, to the possible answer is you're going to school full time.
Mm-hmm.
You have serious health issues.
Yeah.
And yet you're giving your time to help people.
Yeah.
Why?
So I think it's just to do with my upbringing. I grew up in probably like the most dangerous neighborhood in Caldwell. Like I grew up and I remember drive-bys constantly.
Oh, wow.
And I was on the news and I thought it was cool that I was on the news as a kindergartner, but it was because my neighbors had just gotten shot. And so just growing up and that kind of life, like I was an adult, realized that I didn't have a lot of resources there for me. There's no like parks for me to go play in. There's no boys and girls club, like nothing for me to do. And so I think that's kind of a motivating factor that I have now is I want to offer those resources and that help to kids who are living in those situations now and And so I'm just trying to make my way through life and see where I fit in that and what I can do to offer that to people.
That was awesome.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense because, back in the 80s, Caldwell was...
It was really bad.
It was really bad. I mean, Caldwell's now is the place you get land because it's cheap.
Mm-hmm.
But, and it has some gang stuff, but it's not... It's... Like you said, there were drive-bys, there were gang wars. That got fairly cleaned up.
Yeah, it did.
But the remnants of that is still there, where if you live out in Caldwell, you're still treated like crap.
Well, you've got
via association.
The Canyon County Sheriff's Department, which is rather
racist.
Hillbilly, was going to go with. With a city that is majority Latino at this point. Right in the middle of it, second biggest city in that county. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Caldwell is the county seat of Canyon County, which is the county next to the one that Boise's in. It's about 30 miles from Boise, and it is the fourth largest city in the Treasure Valley, and growing rapidly, and the only one that isn't majority white. And by majority, I mean major majority. It is a place people joke about because that's where the poverty is.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of where I grew up. And you can kind of see the social structure within the city, too, how it's kind of arranged. Like there's an elementary school or middle school, I don't know what it is, and then there's a prison right next to it. And so you just kind of like toss them over, when they're old enough. And I think that's the jail everyone keeps escaping from. I'm not even sure. But they're just like right next to each other. And there's no community parks, at least not in that part of Caldwell, not in the Mexican part of Caldwell. Like in the different neighborhoods, you have like little...
It does have its nice neighborhoods.
Yeah, it does.
And it has some fantastic food.
Well, so you got the neighborhoods with the nice parks, and then you have the neighborhoods with the nice restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then you got the neighborhoods with the nice jail.
Yeah. Yeah, and even like the couple parks that are in downtown Caldwell where I grew up in, it's kind of just where all the junkies go to shoot up, and it's super dangerous. Like, someone just got shot there last year. Like, you wouldn't send your kids to play there.
Yeah. The generic skate park.
Yeah.
Kind of place.
Yeah, and it's not all terrible, and there's a lot of good in Caldwell, but there's definitely a lot of help that it needs, and that's kind of where I'm trying to go back and help.
All right. Yeah. Very cool.
Well, one thing that's interesting with Caldwell is you look at the history on it. Like some of my family settled in Caldwell in the 1920s, and my grandparents on my dad's side lived there until they died in the 90s. And it was just this small farming town not too far from Boise. Well, this is the western U.S., where population density is rather low, and white people keep moving to the big cities, not working on the farms. So to keep the farms working, we have a lot of migrant farm workers. And it looks like Caldwell, if I'm correct, got to where it is now because the migrant farm workers kept coming and started congregating there for permanent homes.
Yeah, that's what my family did. Originally, there were migrant farm workers that basically traveled throughout Texas and California and eventually ended up settling here. So that's...
It's amazing how the flow... They migrate up through California. There's not enough work because there's plenty of people because it's easier access. And so they just keep going. And Idaho seems like a really nice little spot to settle.
It's cold up here for a Mexican, let me tell you. Especially since I spent my winters in Mexico. Like, some of the winters here as an adult, I didn't really get to experience as a child. So it's cold. Like, we're tropical people. Like, I excel in like 100-degree weather. Like, if it falls below like 40, I'm like really struggling to survive. Like, I shut down.
You just sit on the couch,
like no,
nestle in blankets.
Yeah. Well, but it makes sense here because Caldwell, you look at where it fits in the Treasure Valley, it's close to Boise, so it's easier for the economic flow back and forth there, and it's on the edge of the more heavily populated area, and you go 30 miles in any direction that's not Boise from Caldwell, and there's farms.
There's orchards, there's farms, there's
lots and lots and lots of farms.
yeah.
So it makes sense.
Heck, we even got wine country out there now.
Yeah. So with, this is one of the things that is, like, for me, it's been interesting because when I was a little kid, I lived in Vail, on a farm, Vail, Oregon, tiny little farming town, that people not from the Treasure Valley don't know exists. And it was at that time mostly small family farms. Since then, it's moved to larger, more industrial farms. And it's been interesting to see the workforce shift as that's happened, as it has moved more towards Mexican farm labor. And I think it's something that a lot of white people in America have a hard time thinking about, is the fact that almost all of our food is grown by and picked by Mexicans, specifically by Mexicans. It's this weird system that we have.
Is it though? I mean, I think it's not weird. I think it totally makes sense. You had what were family farms, and these people broke their backs to keep the farms alive throughout the Great Depression. But their kids didn't want that life, so they retire, and the kids sell off the farms. They become more conglomerate, and so you get a few people that have a huge swaths of land, and there's only one way to take care of that, and that's to contract out, basically. The land is too big, and there aren't enough families to do the family farming anymore.
Yeah.
Especially since the quote-unquote family has shrunk from, like freaking 6 kids down to 2. That was where all the labor was in the kids.
Mm-hmm. But one of the things that people forget to think about when, like with Trump and Mexico just sending bad hombres up. No, we don't have food without labor. And that labor is mostly migrant farm workers from Mexico, almost without exception. And the immigration side of that is crazy. Like your family's moved, or your mom's side at least, entered the U.S. through a program to provide farm labor in the U.S. because there weren't enough white Americans wanting to work in fields. And that's continued. And the organization you work for now, one of the issues they're dealing with is definitely related to that.
Yeah, we have an immigration lawyer on staff, and he does a lot of work to try to help get people here with visa so they can legally work. Because that's really all they want to do is legally work here, or at least bring their family here so they're joined with their family. And some of the stipulations to obtain visas or residency are kind of rough. Like you could not leave the country and come back more than twice, otherwise you're ineligible, like stuff like that. And if you apply for a certain kind of visa to being like a family member, like a brother or a sibling, something like that. I mean, there's people that applied for these visas in the 90s that are barely starting to see these visas. So, I mean, it's really hard to, for some people.
So they make it as hard as possible to make it legal. So what happens? People go to Washington, buy $300 worth of Social Security numbers and IDs, and then that's how they get by. I mean, we set up the system for this illegal immigration to happen, and then whine and cry and bawl when it happens. It's like, no. You gotta make it easy. You've got to make it respectful. Otherwise, people are forced into situations where they have to join gangs and traffic drugs because they can't survive.
Well, and
I don't know.
It's a system that's been around for 100 years, where you get to spend your winters in Mexico where it's warm, and then come up and pick crops in the summer when it's warm. When it's warm up here, it works. It's always worked. And even just with the crazy xenophobic bullshit that's flowing around our politics right now, crops are rotting on the fields.
Yeah. And even here, the dairymen in Idaho are having a hard time finding labor to help on the dairies. And
Idaho's number one product is milk right now. If you don't have people to work the milking stations or feed the cows, or it all just goes to waste.
And like, it sounds good in theory to say, oh, people need to enter legally and apply for these visas, and there's a right way of doing things, but it's so difficult to get a visa or to get legal residency. And sometimes, like, these people who immigrate here, like, their families are really struggling back home. Like, some of them are starving to death, or there's extreme drug violence.
I mean,
from
then there's the ones that come up from Guatemala, who are even worse off.
It's like some people don't have the luxury of waiting 10, 15 years to legally do it when they have children and families to take care of. And honestly, if it were me, I would do whatever it took to make sure my family's safe and they have food. And
well, especially if you don't speak English.
Yeah.
The best job you can expect to get is usually either working on a farm or janitorial crew. And if it takes 15 years to get a visa, your best working years are gone.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, it really does. It is totally backwards.
Unless you want to make the application date when you're 10.
Yeah. And then, like, the system in Mexico is so bad too. The government is so corrupt. I remember living there. We'd get pulled over for really no reason. The cops just wanted money. They just wanted bribe money for whatever. They're like, well, we're going to give you a ticket for this unless you give us 50 pesos. And that's basically, I mean, they don't care. They don't try to be sneaky about it. Like, it's so obvious that it's what they're doing. Like, they're openly corrupt. And so they don't investigate crime there. Like, in the town where my dad's from, there's no police force. Like, people get beat up all the time, assaulted, raped. Like, it's just kind of deal with it. And so it's hard to live in that environment and live in that system and not.
And you don't want to raise kids in that.
Yeah,
so you think of a better way. And
Now, of course, the U.S. is directly responsible for much of that instability in much of Mexico, since the war on drugs has made it so the cartels in many parts of Mexico are the ones in control.
Yeah. And there's some areas that are worse than others. There's areas like Michoacan that have more drug violence, and more so than where we're from in Guanajuato. And so you can find a good place to live and do fine, but there's definitely some areas where people are really struggling and they don't have any help. I mean, the government doesn't care about them at all.
Yeah.
Like, they don't even pretend to care.
Yeah.
Yeah, even Cancun is, from what I hear, is getting a bit sketchier.
Which sucks, because we basically used it, in not a nice term, as our playground for so long. But we haven't contributed to making the lives better at all. It's that still money going to the top 1% kind of deal. We just, as Americans, we just kind of spread that wherever we go.
Yeah. And man, if we could just stop the war on drugs,
that would help.
It would solve so many problems.
Yeah.
If we could actually have a regulated flow of products, or at least not make it so that it's so lucrative to smuggle, it would make such a difference.
And sometimes, like, I know people back in Mexico, like family, friends and stuff, that did farm, like, asparagus, stuff like that, corn. You can't survive on that sometimes. And sometimes in certain areas, only certain rich people have access to water to water their crops. So there's different types of layers to deal with in that regard. And so, like, good families and stuff started resorting to drugs to try to make a living because it's the only viable option for them. And so their farms turned to marijuana farms, like, because it's the only option they had, really. That or starve to death. It's hard.
Yeah.
It is.
All right, changing gears a bit. We talked about this back around episodes 17, 18, so it's been a couple hundred episodes. What's with Mary?
I don't know. Everyone, yeah. So I grew up in a very traditional Mexican Catholic family. You know, I got baptized with my first communion and very strict. And it was interesting kind of bouncing back between both countries growing up, how Catholicism in Mexico, it's kind of its own religion. It's completely different than the Catholicism back here. And there's just this fascination with La Virgen de Guadalupe, and she's kind of like the pinnacle of the religion, like the focus of it all. And then there's a lot of attention towards the saints that are involved in that. And then Catholicism here isn't like that at all. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure why there's that fascination with her.
There's definitely a Roman Catholic, and then there's the Latin Catholic. And it's fascinating. It's just really cool. They are totally different religions, but they still, I mean, they're kind of based off of each other. They've got some similarities, but
yeah, the research I've done under the topic was appeared that basically they took the Aztec goddess and identified her with Mary, and then just instead of worshiping the Aztec goddess, worship Mary.
Fuck the patriarchy.
Because nobody really cared about the Aztec high god. It was the high goddess who gave you babies and crops and all of the fertility stuff. And Mexico still has a largely agrarian society, and anytime you've got agriculture, you tend to have a tendency towards the feminine divine for a fertility cult. And Mexico seems to have found an amazing way of doing that in the modern world.
Yeah, and it's not like Mexicans decided out of nowhere just become Catholic. Like they were murdered, they were slaughtered by Europeans, they were forced to be Catholics. Maybe it was a way to kind of retain part of their identity by kind of focusing on Virgin Mary and
flip off the Pope a little bit.
Yeah. Oh man, it is cool though.
Yeah, it was really surprising when you got married, because at that point we knew that you weren't that religious. That's probably it's one of the reasons we got along so well. And so when we went to the Catholic church, I'm like, okay, well, it's a nice church. It's gorgeous. It's really nice, of course you'd want to give. But then the everything started, and I'm like, oh, this is like legit, like Catholic. You had to go over and like place flowers in front of Mary's statue and pray to her, count to 10 or whatever. And then they had this weird guy up behind who was like the chorus for the priest, or whatever you call the Catholic
priest.
The priest. So he would say some scripture, and then the guy up above was like, "Hallelujah, amen." I'm like, who is that?
What are you doing?
Is he getting paid to do that?
Yeah, and this was kind of so hard to mitigate too when getting married, because my family is Catholic, but they're not like, they're like Jack Catholic kind of. They're just Catholic in theory, but it's so ingrained to their culture and who we are as Mexicans that you can't really separate, at least in my family, like religion from culture. And so even though my parents probably haven't even been to church in years, getting married in a Catholic church was like imperative for me. Like I had to do that. That's the right way. Because if you just go to a courthouse and do it that way, it's not official. It's not a real marriage. And so we fought for a long time, going back and forth, like, Mom, like, I'm not religious. Like, I don't believe in anything. And then it was just kind of like, well, just go through the motions. Like, and so that's kind of what I talked with Derek too, because he's not religious at all. And so we just decided it was just easier to go through the motions and just get married there and let them be happy, and as long as they know.
Was it was it's kind of rude to ask, but was there money involved? Did your parents pay for the wedding?
No, they did pay for the church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then also,
because that happens a lot where you kind of get pigeonholed into a wedding you don't really want, because the parents are like, well, do you want a wedding? They hold money in front of your face, and you're like, well,
yeah. And then we went to visit the church, and it's a big, huge cathedral with like
so definitely
everywhere.
A gemstone.
And I was like,
Boise.
Okay, like I can do this.
Cool.
Maybe I can pretend for an hour. Like we can do this. So yeah, we got married there, and my family's happy, and then we're just moving on. So it was
definitely the after party.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Derek's side of the family, he's white. He's very white. He's like Norwegian, Scandinavian, like very white. And then a lot of his family's Mormon too. So we were kind of like, how is this going to work with a bunch of Mexicans partying and then like Mormons? Like, we were like, I don't know. Hopefully they get along, and everything worked out fine. But yeah, like, I'm sure they were uncomfortable.
I
for
was
a while.
wondering what his background was. I figured it was Mormon, but because just the area that we live in. But they can party sometimes. But yeah, that was pretty awesome. It's keeping the tradition alive while not actually believing in it. Yeah. I think a lot of people can understand that.
Yeah. And it's so hard, especially when you talk to like older members of your family, like your grandparents, for instance, or your mom or dad. Like, it's such a big part of who they are and how they culturally identify, that you're kind of turning their back on culture if you're like, no, I'm not going to do this, because religion is such a big part of who they are just to begin with.
Yeah. So, and when you are a Latino in the Western United States, you're constantly having to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Like, your right to be there, even though you do. And a part of that is to embrace the culture and to say, no, this is a part of my heritage. And so to lose some of that would be devastating to a lot of people. Yeah. So I can kind of see grandparents and parents seeing millennial kids growing up and kind of shunning away from that and being like, no, this is your identity. Mm-hmm. You're going to lose respect. You're going to lose your place in the world if you go against this. But I think for the most part, we understand that. We just don't care anymore.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see and do some reflection and see how that's kind of ingrained in me also. Like I talked about it earlier. Like my house, I have little saints and little candles and little virgins and stuff everywhere. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? But yeah, it's just, I don't really know. Like, it's just, I guess, part of my culture. And I know it confuses Derek a lot sometimes too, because he's like, what are you doing with this little statue? I'm like, I don't know, I just like it. And then my family comes over and they're happy to see that. But I think it's just comforting to see like part of who I am. It's just like surrounding myself with these little figurines.
It's nostalgia, it's familiar. Yeah. It's something that you want to share with people. Mm-hmm. I can understand poor little Derek. I always think of him as this little fledgling. And you're like taking him under your wing to show him this greater, wider world.
Introduced him to churros and
full of food, mostly food.
Yeah, and so yeah, he had. I think he's like, when we first started dating, he was like, I haven't really met any Mexicans, and he had no like idea any of the cultural stuff. Like, he had no idea. Like, he knew like what tacos and burritos are, like basic stuff like that, but beyond that, he wasn't very familiar with stuff. So it was kind of interesting, kind of showing him some things, and he was like really scared to be around my family, and now he loves it. And so it's kind of interesting to see, like, if we do decide to have kids, how they're going to grow up with two cultures, kind of.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun part.
I don't want to like omit his culture either, and I want them to know that you are half white, and these are the things that your dad's family does, but my culture is just so like out there in your face. Let's party, let's do all that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's quite, especially if you're a conservative Mormon family. It's just, you don't talk about those things. You don't talk about alcohol and dancing and Mexicans. God, you don't talk about Mexicans. You, the food you make is all made out of cream of chicken and freaking
I know.
butter.
Derek joked one time. He's
no
like,
spices.
He's like, my great grandparents are probably rolling in their grave right now. I'm like, yeah.
That's okay. You're not Mexican. You're Spanish.
Yeah.
Makes it sound more legit.
That was my grandparents. We had in the Adventist church there in Vail. There was a Mexican couple who had bought a farm probably another 10 miles up. And they had a kid who was 3 weeks older than me. So he and I were really good friends. And my grandparents liked them a lot. And it's like, no, they're not Mexican. They're Spanish. It's like, no, you're a racist. I never said that, but, oh, man.
Pretty funny.
Yeah. A lot of older people are like that, too.
As far as Mormon culture and Mexican culture, your family would win.
Yeah.
Yep. Your culture
we would
totally
shank
win.
someone for sure.
No, not like that.
No, for what
I'm
you're
kidding.
For what your kids would prefer. They would prefer definitely.
And
the
Derek's family is Mormon. His parents aren't actively like part of the church and stuff, and so
Jack Mormon.
yeah, so they're more Jack Mormon. And what I appreciate about them is that they never try to influence him at all. Like, he's not baptized. They didn't try to pressure him to do anything. And I think that's why I love being around him, and he kind of helps and supports me in this aspect, is that he's just so willing and accepting, and seeing how I was raised, and everything was so forced, and you have to do this, and you have to go to church, and you have to do your first communion, and go to classes for weeks. And so he's totally understanding when I'm like, when we have kids, like, they're gonna do whatever they want to do.
Oh, did you have to do the classes for the wedding?
Yeah.
The Catholic classes?
I think it was 2 or 3 months we went to classes every week.
Oh my gosh.
And talked about the good Lord.
Oh my god.
And how our relationship wasn't just
Oh, it's
us.
not you two.
It's a threesome with God.
It's a threesome with God. Oh my god.
And so we got a book, and we had to watch videos and answer questions, and we have like a model couple that was assigned to us, and we're supposed to talk to them if we have any questions. They're kind of like our role models to look into. And so that was kind of, at first I was like...
I would be sending them questions like, we have guests coming over. Should we use top shelf tequila or...
Yeah, so when
just to throw for
the
a
classes
loop.
were at the church, and I hadn't probably at this time been like stepped inside a church for like 6-7 years. And so I was telling Derek, I was like, I'm probably going to combust into flames as soon as I walk in.
There's always the
and
joke.
no, it didn't happen. But towards the end of the classes, we were trying to be on our best behavior, just like, yes, like, we're Catholic, like, we can do this. And we were late for like the final ceremony where we got our certificates that we graduated this class. And so we're in a hurry trying to rush in so we're not late. Derek flings the door open. Everyone's like, there's like a group of like 50 people there. And he's like startled. He like flings the door open and it like hits something on the back, and he like yells. He's like, "Holy shit!" And I'm like, Derek, like, out of all the things you could have said, why did you say that? So I internally died.
That's
for a
nice.
second, but we got our certificate, and then we just haven't really been back since.
Yeah, screw that.
Sorry, guys.
We have a joke at the Unitarian Church. The only time you ever hear Jesus Christ is when the janitor falls down the stairs. But that's great. Holy shit.
I was like, oh, yeah. And everyone just stared at us.
Knee-jerk
and I'm like,
reaction. I would have
Derek, out
laughed.
of all the things you could have said, you picked the worst one.
There is actually worse.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but people don't let motherfucking Pope doesn't really just slide off the tongue.
Yeah.
Oh, good times. Good times.
Yeah, that was interesting. I'm glad that's all over with now.
Yeah.
So we're married. We don't have to go to church again, unless they're having some party,
Unless there's a party.
and we want to.
Totally understand that. I'm a sucker for Mormon funerals.
I haven't been.
The funeral potatoes are worth it.
Oh, I have had those.
Those are
really good.
they're heaven in the casserole. But again, like I said, not a whole lot of spices, just a lot of fat. Pioneer comfort food. That's what that is.
Okay, so what's with the skulls and death and all of that in Mexican culture?
So there's the calaveras are a big part of the culture, especially around this time, Day of the Dead. And it's just a good representation of death and the family members that have passed on. And they're called Catrinas, is what they're called.
Catrinas, that's right.
And they have like the dresses, and sometimes they have hats with flowers. And then, so yeah, it's just a representation of that. And it's stronger in different parts of Mexico. You can see that those traditions that are followed through more closely than in other areas. But it's interesting to me to see how a lot of that has kind of gone here too. Because I went to Target and there's like sugar skull stuff everywhere. I'm like, well, like I'm not sure
Cultural
if I should be
appropriation.
is this good or is this bad? I'm not sure.
There's nothing better on Halloween than to look around and see a bunch of white frats dressed up in sombreros and drinking tequila. And just shaking your head going, oh my God, that's so racist. But on the other hand, it makes access to this stuff easier. So like I find Day of the Dead to be absolutely charming. I mean, the skulls are naturally kind of cheerful. Mm-hmm. They're smiling. There's almost always some kind of representation of like a bride and groom, or you know, the woman with the hat, and it's all very. It makes death something to not be afraid of, but something to celebrate. You know, when somebody passes on, yeah, you're sad, but they lived a life and they influenced you, and that's something to celebrate, not to be scared of.
Yeah, and even with my family, even if it's not, you know, a Day of the Dead altar or anything like that, we have pictures of my grandpa or other relatives with like flowers and candles, like just throughout the year. Like you're really family oriented, and we're really, really, really close knit with even extended members of the family. And so we always commemorate those people that have kind of passed on. And so, yeah, we have like a little altar at home right now, and I have one for my dog, Juliet, and like her collar, her ashes, and
you're gonna make me cry.
Her little things that she liked. And I think that's like, it's kind of sad to me when, you know, you go to Target and there's like a Day of the Dead mug or like stuff like that you can just but it's just like a lot of people don't take the time to appreciate it. And like, it's good. Like, I don't care if people like have it everywhere, but like take the time to understand what it's about and not just disregard it. It's just like, oh, this looks cool. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, except the standard American way is you take what seems edgy or interesting or cooler about other cultures and strip all meaning from it, and then just take the symbols.
But there's always a chance for education there, too.
Which Target was it you saw it in?
The one in Boise. Yeah, and it's interesting to see how different products are marketed in different areas. Like the Caldwell stuff, like the Caldwell Walmart has like a bunch of different stuff that's more culturally oriented.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like towards us and our community. Whereas like when I lived in Boise, I was like struggling. Like I needed stuff and I had to go all the way out there to get it. And so it was kind of nice.
That's why I love Winco, because they have the whole the Mexican aisle. Mm-hmm. And that's where you can get your little saint candles and your 50 types of chili powder. And if you want to cook it yourself, you have to go to Winco. You can't go to Walmart. You can't go to Albertsons. Fred Meyer. Those places are a joke. I mean, they have some salsa. It's like, woo, so edgy. But no, if you want to make like...
Yeah, there's a bunch of little markets around here. There's one on Orchard called Campos Market.
Campos is the best.
I have a lot
of course, I'm biased because I worked there. I worked around the corner there for so long.
Oh, Derek used to be really scared to go in there. He's like, everyone's staring at me. I'm like,
if Dustin and I go to one of the Middle Eastern or African markets just to try some different spices or something, and I'm wearing like a tank top, I'm like, oh man, how many people am I offending right now? The worst thing that they do is they ignore you, which is fine. I can handle that.
Yeah. But
now I really want some street tacos.
Yeah, and then in Caldwell, there's like street vendors everywhere. They go around their little carts. Have you seen Nacho Libre?
Yes.
Where he has like the little cart and the bicycle and he's driving around. So kind of like that. And they sell like elotes or lollipop popsicles or
elotes,
tamales. Like they have everything. So
I finally made elotes once and it was like, this is amazing.
Derek was like, why are you putting that on the corn? I'm like,
what are you doing to the corn?
Just try it.
Try it. It was like when the guy in Mexico handed me a coconut dipped in chili powder. I'm like, I'm not really up for spice. He's like, no, try it. And I tried it and you couldn't taste it. You could taste a flavor, a smoky flavor, but no spice. I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah, Derek is super dramatic. Like he was like pretending to gag and I'm like, come on. And now he like eats them. He's like, whatever. But yeah, he likes to be dramatic.
Yeah.
He's an honorary Mexican now. His name is Diego now.
Oh,
so, yeah.
That's so cute.
Diego Pearson.
I love it.
Shouldn't that be more like Person?
Yeah.
Person.
With an accent mark.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Oh man, but no man, the food in Caldwell is awesome.
Oh, that taco place. I can't I can never remember
My
the name.
favorite taco place in Caldwell is called Tacos El Rey. It's in downtown Caldwell. It's like a small little red building, but they have the best tacos, and you kind of watch them back there too as you're ordering. They're hand making the tortillas and like doing everything, so everything's super fresh, and so we love going there.
We found a seafood place that
The seafood taco place. That's
is amazing.
There's
it's almost off in the residential district. It's like off the edge of Caldwell, surrounded by houses. But I mean, when his parents came and visited, we met them in Caldwell, so we could take them out to this restaurant.
There's a place called El Compa or something like that. It's basically just seafood is their main thing. Whenever you guys have a minute, we can go out there and I'll show you around.
Are you kidding? I'm ready for it right now.
Yeah, let's go.
It's only 3:30. Let's just book it.
Yeah, and then when I only know how to cook Mexican food, and so when I moved in with Derek, I tried to, be like cooking all the time and try to impress him. I don't do that at all now. Like, we survive off a block of cheese for the week.
Yep.
Because we're too lazy. But yeah, all I cooked was Mexican food, and the food that I do know how to cook is super traditional, like mole and stuff like that isn't as mainstream as, Derek was used to. I remember one time he's like, I've had diarrhea for a week, like cook something else. I'm like, sorry, dude, like, don't know.
Here's some rice. I don't know.
I don't know what you eat.
But it's still got 50 spices in it,
Yeah.
so deal with that.
Oh man.
I was raised to have a great appreciation for foreign foods. So I've been very proud of the fact that I've never been like sick off of. People make jokes about Mexican food and diarrhea and stuff. That's never happened to me, except for when that one time we were in Mexico and there was a kid manning the grill and he was handling the food raw and cooked and then handed it to us, and of course we got a little sick off of that. But
yep. A little bit of salmonella poisoning.
a little bit.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's just been delicious. We stopped at a park and got some tamales from this little old lady, and she was just precious. I'm like, I'm gonna take you home.
Yeah, I'm very excited to take Derek one day
Oh yeah.
and see what he thinks about it. I'm sure he'll be a little scared. He's like, I think I'm gonna get kidnapped. I'm like, no, like, you're
Sorry,
fine.
hon, you're not worth it.
I was like, don't flatter yourself.
Yeah.
Stay away from the border and you're fine.
Not where you're from. I mean, central Mexico's fairly safe.
Especially like Guanajuato. It's pretty good to be there. Like, you're good.
Yeah, you have to watch yourself on some of the northern border and some of the coastal areas. But, I mean, Mexico's huge. Okay. There's a lot of area you can go to where you're perfectly safe.
I have some family in Tijuana, and it's kind of rough there. Like, I wouldn't take him there right off the bat, but...
No.
That was my first exposure to Mexico.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was 8. It was awesome.
Was it?
Yeah.
It's just a lot going on.
You're planning on going to law school.
Yeah. So I had initially planned on taking my LSATs this fall, but I've just been so busy. I haven't had time to study for them at all. So I think I'm going to postpone those until the spring and then apply then and see how that goes. And I'm trying to get into the U of I here in Boise. They have a little extension.
That's the way to do
law
it.
school extension here.
From what I've heard.
Yeah, so...
I was going to say, but the LSATs are so plainly written on your calendar of doom.
Oh, yeah. Did you see that?
Oh, my God. There's highlighter everywhere. Every day has like 16 things written out. You've got all these notes on the sides and the margins.
I have like monthly goals.
LSATs. Pay attention to the major tests. It's like, oh,
yeah,
God.
like I just have so much going on with school and work right now that if I don't have everything written on one calendar, I'm just going to selectively ignore it and not even pay attention to it. Like, I don't know. So I have to be super...
Well, if you ever do decide to have kids, you're going to be that mom.
I think I am, unfortunately.
Kids are color-coded.
They're going to have their meals prepared, like everything.
Prepped for a week.
Yeah.
Definitely. And you want to continue doing the Hispanic outreach with the law?
Yeah. So I'm looking into immigration law.
All right.
So just kind of offering my services that way and see what I can do. There's some immigration lawyers here, and there's a handful that are Latino, but not enough, I feel. So
not enough to be representative of the population. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get immigrants from all over, especially if you consider the refugee stuff. But when it comes to just like pure like come here to work kind of stuff, it is mostly, it's going to be mostly Mexican or Guatemalan. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have somebody with a background who understands how to get through the process. Yeah. And with our current environment in the age of Trump, we're going to need a lot of people who are willing to work with that system to fix it after it's all been torn down or burned, or I don't know. It's frustrating. I'm frustrated with that there's a whole chunk of America who still feels that way about immigration.
Well, even if you were to kind of pay more attention to it and try to reform it in a positive way, the argument is that there's all these criminals coming in, but you're not really doing much about it. Like, why not create a reform system that will help the families come here and stay to work?
Why do people commit crime?
Yeah.
It's almost always having to do with poverty and stability of maintaining a family. Mm-hmm. And if you help there's going to be less crime. A lot of that includes education, being protected by the police rather than being harassed by police, feeling like you're actually part of the community.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be done. So that'll be they'll benefit greatly from your expertise.
If I can get in.
If you can get in. If not, you know what? You're set up pretty well.
Yeah.
To help out anyway.
Like, I didn't want to be a lawyer anyway.
Yeah.
All right, Raquel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All righty. Well, thank you so much. And for our listeners, we'll be back next week. Remember, not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Atheist Nomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.